How's it going, everyone? We are on the way to our destination of the day, which is a very, very exciting trail that I found just wandering around on campus. And I say very, very exciting, but I don't know yet what it is. I've not ever walked it before. But it's exciting, one, because it's a beautiful day, two, because it's something new to try, and three, because nature, we love it. It's windy. I've got a good book to read. I've got my little chair, and it is very windy. Anyways, this is what it's called. The Tar Kiln Trail. How long is it? I don't believe it's very long. I think it's less than a mile long. But I plan on going to read, so walk with me. Let's see, is it cooler? Split? Okay. So, the book for today is called Against the Day by Thomas Pynchon. Real quick. It is, I guess someone built a little, looks like a perfect fire to start. Gonna pass on that though. Against the Day is a novel by Thomas Pynchon, and according to what I have found from the sources online, Reddit, etc., is that it is his most accessible novel in terms of understanding and reading. Zurich Sandhill Community. Can't say I know what that is. Community is an assemblage of interacting species, like an ecosystem. Okay. Inclusive of biotic and abiotic components. Well, it's peaceful. It's nice how there are a lot of pine trees. Anyways, back to Against the Day. Apparently it's his most accessible novel. And I guess if you followed my video, if you watched any of my videos about Gravity's Rainbow, that's a book by him that I read recently, and that was a hard book to read. It was very out there, very psychedelic, required a lot of imagination, and a lot of patience and focus. Let's see, what is this? So this is a little trail on campus, UNCW, where I am going to school for social work masters. Baymead soil. Not necessarily my area of interest, but What's this guy over here? It looks like a nettle. Those spines. Looks like a stinging nettle. I don't really want to test it out. My mom actually makes smoothies with the stinging nettles in them, and they just grind up, and I guess they don't sting your throat on the way down, but kind of freaks me out either way. And it looks like the path goes to the left, straight, and to the right, which is interesting because I thought that it was just up and back. So I'm just going to continue straight. Back to the book. So, Gravity's Rainbow was about, I guess, post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic. Geez, that thing was big, whatever it was. Or apocalyptic life during wartime, like that Talking Head song, Life During Wartime. Oh, there's some dude on a dirt bike here. Yeah, so that book was kind of freaky, psychedelic, as I said, hard to grasp, but it won the Book of the Year award sometime after it was published. We got another shelter over here. Interesting. Electric biker man. Reminds me of the those speed bikes from Star Wars in the Ewok forest. Looks like kind of a fun activity. Anyways, Against the Day is a book that I'm kind of, I don't know. It's hard to find like a comprehensive summary of what the book is about. I will read the back when we get to the destination, but it seems to be of a steampunk sort of theme. And steampunk is kind of mixing like Victorian, like inventions of the Victorian era with modern or postmodern ideas. I guess the idea of steampunk is to keep alive certain inventions, because even though they may not be as polished, they provide, I guess, nostalgic value, sentimental value. It's like, I guess, it reminds me of the concept of a historic district in any city or town. It's like keeping the charm of the past alive, which I see value in because when I worked as a real estate agent, I noticed that all of the new build properties were pretty ugly, including the really expensive single-family detached houses in the millions. They're just very bland, and I guess it has to do with what I like to call de-evolution. But anyways, so steampunk's kind of a cool genre. There's a game that my friend used to love on the PlayStation. I forget what it was called, but it was very, very steampunk. If I remember it, I'll share what it was called. Can't think of it. Like Thieves something. thieves, something thief. I don't know. Well, the plan is to just plop down and read. And I'll read aloud today. I'll read some of the passages aloud so you can get an idea of what it's like. I'm thinking of potentially doing videos where I read full stories. So I'll break them into parts. Yeah, the trails are cool here. I'm definitely gonna come back here and walk again at some point. It's beautiful. How intriguing something so simple can be as bark on a tree. I've also thought of a project that I've been considering on Substack. This made me think of it. The idea is that I would take photos of things up close and then post them, and the project was going to be called like Zoom Out or something. And the idea is that I'm going to post a picture of something up close and provide hints, I guess, for what it is, and invite people to guess what the photo is zoomed in of. And the idea behind it, or the reasoning, is because I think it's important to see things up, to zoom out, because I think we see a lot of things up close and we do not zoom enough. All right, this one actually seems a little more interesting. Tar kiln. To collect tar from a slow-burning pine. Interesting. Interesting. So these fires burned not hot enough for the tar to be consumed in the fire. Where is the tar kiln in front of me? Older than the oldest tree on the kiln. At least 100 years old. Let's see if we can find it. Yeah, I don't see anything. Here comes biker boy. Does look like a lot of fun. Wonder what that was. I guess this was the... Huh. I mean, this definitely wasn't the tar kiln, so I have no idea what this is. UNCW Research Forest. Yeah, I mean, the trees here are so cool. I'll zoom out again. park is awesome. There's something very special about wandering through forests like this. Anyways, steampunk is a genre or a subgenre, I guess, that I am not particularly very knowledgeable about. And I don't think it was sold as a steampunk type novel. I think it was just Pynchon being Pynchon. But I think that's how people interpret it. And honestly, I think one of the main reasons that I have chose his books are because they are known to be challenging. Like Gravity's Rainbow is known to be one of the more challenging books to read. So I read it as a challenge. I want to continue on this way. So Against the Day is a big one. I think it's like 1,100 pages. And this brings me back to when I was very, very young. And I remember my sister was growing up and the Harry Potter books had just come out. And the movies were starting to come out a few years later, and my sister had read all of the books. I think she read them with my mom and dad before bed. And I know that the books were like, some of them were, I think Order of the Phoenix was 500 pages or something. Long story short, I never read them. I read maybe one or two of them, the early ones, the shorter books. But I did not read the series. I read only a couple. And then I said, screw it, I'm going to watch the movies. Because movies are more appealing. Easier. Such a cute little canopy. The movies are easier. More exciting. The work of the imagination is done for you. This is something I didn't really realize until I was like 26, was that TV and movies take the necessity of your imagination working away. That's what I love about reading, is you're required to use your imagination. Or not so much required, it's just that it happens automatically. Wow, this place is so cool. I'm definitely coming back here again. It's a lot farther in than I thought it went. But yeah, with reading, your imagination automatically kicks in. You read words and you think of something. When I read the word orange, I think of orange, or of what an orange looks like. So when I'm reading a story about some random characters made up in a random location, I think of what is described to me, and it's just automatic. But when I watch a movie or a TV show, that part's already done, because you see it. So, back to the main story. Never read the Harry Potter books, watched all the movies. I love the story. It's one of my favorite series over the course of my lifetime, as it is for many. But I don't know. I guess one series that is not the case is Star Wars 1, because there aren't any books, as far as I know. 2, The Lord of the Rings. I have not read the book yet, but I've not seen any of the movies. I just read The Hobbit last year, or 2 years ago, and I watched the 3 movies after. So that was like one of the first times that I've read the movies, or read the books before watching the movies. And The Hobbit was interesting because they turned, I think, like a 350-page book into 3 3-hour movies. and I think it was unnecessary. This place is really cool. But basically, I find myself appreciating the challenge of reading. It's not as easy as watching something, plopping back. It's less mindless. But I don't know. There's a time and place for everything, I guess. Interesting. The spider webs are like little buckets. It's got me thinking of the Spell of the Sensuous book. Cool. Love all the ferns. So, I bought The Lord of the Rings, and I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to watch the movies after. And we'll see how it goes. It's a funny thing, because people who read the books, people who read the books first and then watch the movies always say that it is not so exciting. But I don't know, maybe it's just a cult type thing. So strange. I have no idea what this trail even is. I don't know how. I guess I'll have to find my way back to my car somehow. First person I've seen except for Biker Boy. Yes, so Against the Day is a big one. And it reminds me of the days when I told myself I would not read Harry Potter because it was too big. 850 pages was too much for me to commit to as far as books went. So I'm going to give Against the Day a shot. I'm about 100 pages into it right now, maybe like 85. Trying to find a good spot to sit down. I mean, this kind of looks fine here. But it's where paths intersect. Yeah. Gotta be a better spot. Yeah, so I'll do it. Gravity's Rainbow was like, I think 850, 900 pages. So I know I can do it. Gravity's Rainbow took me like 3 weeks, which is shorter than I expected. Kind of looks like a nice spot in here with this tilted over tree. I'll go for it. Hello. All right. This is our spot. I set you up. more exciting. Perfect. So, gravity's rainbow is against the day. Here it is, the dictionary. It's a big guy. It opens with a scene including like a big blimp, hydrogen blimp, and kind of like a big gang of hydrogen blimps. Definitely brings me to that steampunk feel. But yeah, we'll start off by reading the back. Spanning the era between the Chicago World's Fair of 1893 and the years just after World War I, and constantly moving between locations across the globe, and to a few places not strictly speaking on the map at all, Against the Day unfolds with a phantasmagoria of characters that includes anarchists, balloonists, gamblers, drug enthusiasts, mathematicians, mad scientists, shamans, spies, and hired guns. As an era of uncertainty comes crashing down around their ears, an unpredictable future commences. These folks are mostly just trying to pursue their lives. Sometimes they manage to catch up. Sometimes it's their lives that pursue them. I love that last line. That's how life often feels for me. Feels like I'm either chasing down life or life is chasing me down. According to the New York Times, Pynchon's funniest and arguably his most accessible novel. Against the Day is a major work of art, and like all creations of surpassing greatness, something to be studied. Well, let's get to it. Maybe I can get a real full camping chair one day. Kind of nice to have this fallen over tree as a backrest. And I've got my little Charlie Brown's Christmas tree next to me. I don't know. It's like books like these are intriguing because they feel like speculative, but they're speculative like in the sense of the past, not the future, because this is set in a time just following World War I, and Gravity's Rainbow is more around the time of World War II. Get me back to the beginning of a paragraph. You think they're too strong for the workers? At which Vaco's eyes would grow pale and illuminated from within, his voice issuing from an abundant and unkempt beard. That's gotta be a typo. It's interesting to see a typo in a book that's been out for quite a while. I don't know what printing this is, but there's no way that's on purpose. Unkempt. Unkept with an M in it. Unkempt beard, which suggested, even on his calmest days, an insane fanaticism. We are their strength. Without us they are impotent. We are they, and so forth. Webb had learned that if you stayed quiet and just waited, these spells passed, and pretty soon the Finn would be back to his usual self, stolid as ever, reaching sociably for the vodka. At the moment, however, Webb noticed that Vaco had been sitting reading over and over to himself a withered postcard from Finland, a troubled look on his face, a slow flush gathering around his eyes. "Look, these aren't real stamps here," Vaco said. "They are pictures of stamps. The Russians no longer allow Finnish stamps. We have to use Russian ones. These postmarks, they're not real either. Pictures of postmarks. This one, August 14, 1900, was the last day we could use our own stamps for overseas mail. So this is a postcard with a picture of what a postcard used to look like before the Russians. That's what miniskort means. Memory card. A memory of a memory. It was a card from his sister back in Finland. Nothing in particular. They censor everything. Nothing that would get anyone in trouble. Family news. My crazy family." He gestured toward Webb with the vodka canteen. "I'll wait." "I won't." Vaco, being the sort of blaster who likes to watch it happen, had brought along an oak magneto box and a big spool of wire, whereas Webb, more circumspect and preferring to be well out of the area, tended to go for the $2 Ingersoll or time delay method. Their target was a railroad bridge across a little canyon on a spur between the main line and Relampagos, a mining town upon northeast of Silverton. Fairly straightforward. 4 wood trestles of different heights holding up some iron fink trusses. Webb and Vaco got into the usual argument about whether to blast the sucker now or wait till a train came. "You know how owners are," Vaco said. "Lazy sons of bitches can't be bothered to saddle up. They take trains wherever they go. We blow train, maybe get a couple of them with it. I ain't about to sit out here all day waiting for some train that likely won't be running anyhow, it being a 3-day holiday." "It easy nigh poroha," replied Vaco, a pleasantry, long-grown routine, meaning, "your mother fucks reindeer." The tricky patch, it had seemed to Webb for a while now, came in choosing the targets, it being hard enough just to find time to think any of it through. Under the daily burdens of duty and hard labor, more often than you'd think, grief. Lord knew that owners and mine managers deserved to be blown up, except that they had learned to keep extra protection around them, not that going after their property, like factories or mines, was the much better of an idea. For, given the nature of corporate greed, those places would usually be working 3 shifts, with the folks most likely to end up dying being miners, including children, working as nippers and swampers, the same folks who die when the army comes charging in. Not that any owner ever cared rat shit about the lives of workers, of course, except to define them as innocent victims in whose name uniformed goons could then go out and hunt down the monsters that did the deed. And even worse, the sort of thing that can get a true bomber mighty irritated, Some of these explosions, the more deadly of them, in fact, were really set off to begin with not by anarchists, but by the owners themselves. Imagine that. Here was nitro, the medium of truth, being used by these criminal bastards to tell their lies with. Damn. The first time Webb saw hard proof of this going on, he felt like a kid about to cry, that the world should know so little about what was good for it, which left precious few targets except for the railroad. Fair enough to Webb's way of thinking, for the railroad has always been the enemy, going back generations. Farmers, stockmen, buffalo hunting Indians, track-laying Chinamen, passengers in train wrecks. Whoever you were out here, sooner or later, you had some bad history with the railroad. He had worked as a section hand just enough over the years to at least know where to spot the charges so they'd do the most good. They took cord and bundled the sticks together. Webb was far more partial to gelatin, which let you shape the charge some and direct the blast better, but that made sense only in the cooler weather. Keeping an eye out for the snakes, they worked their way along the wash, placing the charges in the shade when they could and piling rocks and dirt around. The day was quiet, windless. A red-tailed hawk hung up there and seemed to be looking at them, which would put them in the same category as field rodents, which in turn would put the hawk in the same category as a mine manager. Webb shook his head irritably. He did not much admire himself when he drifted off this way. It was always minute to minute, step to step, and he had seen too many good brothers and sisters end up in the dirt, or in the fathomless dark at the bottom of some shaft, as the price of inattention. Fact, if he'd known what it cost, the total cost, spread over a lifetime, he wondered sometimes if he ever would have signed on. Webb's trajectory toward the communication of toil, which had claimed his life, had begun right out of the middle of Cripple Creek, blooming in those days like a flower of poisonous delight among its spoil heaps, cribs, parlor houses, and gambling saloons. It was a time in Cripple and Victor, Leadville and Creedle, when men were finding their way to the unblastable seams of their own secret natures, learning the true names of desire, which spoken, so they dreamed, would open the way through the mountains to all that had been denied them. In the broken and soon enough interpreted dreams, close to dawn in particular, Webb would find himself standing at some divide, facing west into a great flow of promise, something like wind, something like light, free of the damaged hopes and pestilent smoke east of here, sacrificial smoke maybe, but not ascending to heaven, only high enough to be breathed in, to sicken and cut short countless lives, to change the color of daylight and deny to workers of the night the stars they remembered from younger times. He would wake to the day and its dread. The trail back to that high place in the luminous promise did not run by way of Cripple, though Cripple would have to serve hopes corroded to fragments, overnight whiskey, daughters of slaves, rigged faro games, the ladies who worked on the line. One night, in Shorty's billiard saloon, some pool player had propelled his cue ball, on the break perhaps too forcefully, and with scarcely any draw onto it, into the triangle of shiny balls, which happened to be made of some newly patented variety of celluloid. Upon being struck, the first ball exploded, initiating a chain of similar explosions across the table. Mistaking these for gunshots, several among the clientele drew their pistols and began, with some absence of thought, to contribute in their own ways to the commotion. "Nice break," somebody was heard to say before the noise got too loud. Webb, frozen in terror, delayed diving for cover until it was all over, realizing after a while that he had been standing in a room full of flying lead without being hit once. How could this be? He found himself in the street, wandering hatless and confused, colliding presently with the Reverend Moss Gatlin, who was stumbling down a long flight of wood stairs. There goes a pine cone. Long flight of wood stairs. Is that a... I think that there are chiggers crawling onto me. If those are what those little red bugs are. He found himself in the street, wandering hatless, stumbling down. He found himself in the street, wandering hatless and confused, colliding presently with the Reverend Moss Gatlin, who was stumbling down a long flight of wood stairs from a sojourn up at Florette's cloud-top retreat, not exactly, at the moment, looking for uninstructed souls, which didn't keep Webb, in a torrent of speech, from telling the Rev all about his miraculous escape. "Brother, we are stripes and solids on the pool table of earthly existence," the Rev explained, "and God and his angels are the shapers who keep us ever in motion, the sharpers." Instead of dismissing this for the offhand preacherly drivel it almost certainly was, Webb, in what you'd have to call a state of heightened receptivity, stood there as if professionally sapped for another quarter of an hour after the Rev had moved on, ignored by the pernicious bustle of Myers Street. And the following Sunday could be observed in the back room of the Faro establishment where Reverend Gatlin preached his ministry, listening as if much, maybe all, depended on it, to the sermon which happened to take as its text Matthew 4:18 and 19. "And Jesus walked by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And Jesus, elaborated Moss, walking out by some American lake, some reservoir in the mountains. Here's Billy and his brother Pete, casting quarter sticks of dynamite into the lake, for they are dynamiters, and harvesting whatever floats to the surface. What does Jesus think of this, and what does he say unto them? What will he make them fishers of? For dynamite is both the miner's curse, the outward and audible sound of the enslavement to mineral extraction, and the American working man's equalizer, his agent of deliverance, if he would only dare to use it, every time a stick goes off in the service of the owners, a blast convertible at the end of some chain of accountancy to dollars sums no miners ever saw. There would have to be a corresponding entry on the other side of God's ledger, convertible to human freedom no owner is willing to grant. You've heard the suggestion that there are no innocent bourgeoisie. One of those French anarchists, some say Emile Henry, as he was going to the guillotine, others say Vaillant when they tried him for bombing the Chamber of Deputies. Answering the question, how can anyone set off a bomb that will take any innocent lives? Long fuse, somebody hollered helpfully. Easier with a timer. Think about it, when the remarks had faded some. like original sin, only with exceptions. Being born into this doesn't automatically make you innocent. But when you reach a point in your life where you understand who is fucking who, beg pardon, Lord, who's taking it and who's not, that's when you're obliged to choose how much you'll go along with. If you are not devoting every breath of every waking day and sleeping to destroy those who slaughter the innocent as easy as signing a check, then how innocent are you willing to call yourself? It must be negotiated with the day from those absolute terms. I got stung or bit or whatever they do by one of those red things on my arm, and it is so itchy, but I can't even see anything. Yeah, maybe a full camping chair would be a little better for the pure wilderness. It would have been almost like being born again, except that Webb had never been particularly religious, nor had any of his family, an old ridge running clan from southern Pennsylvania, close to the Mason-Dixon, the name of another of his novels. The Civil War, which ate up a good part of Webb's boyhood, split the family as well, so that shortly before it was over, he found himself in the back of a wagon heading west. About the same time, other traverse irreconcilables were choosing to head for Mexico. But hell, same thing. Across the Ohio, in a hill town whose name he soon couldn't remember, there was a dark-haired girl Webb's age, whose name, Teresa, he would never forget. They were out walking the wagon ruts. Just beyond a fence line, the hills went rushing away. The sky was clouded over. It might have been between rain showers, and young Webb was all ready to unburden his heart, which, like the sky, was about to reveal something beyond itself. He almost did tell her. They both seemed to see it coming, and later, heading west, he carried with him that silence that had stretched on between them until there was no point anymore. He might have stayed, otherwise, snuck off from the wagons, headed back to her. She might have found a way to come after him, too. But that was a dream, really. He didn't know. He would never know how she felt. It took maybe 9 or 10 years, more of westward drift, over the rolling prairie, through the cheat grass, the sage grouse exploding skyward, the dread silences when skies grow back in the middle of all that country, outracing cyclones and range fires, switchbacking up the eastern slope of the Rockies, through meadows of mule ear and sneezeweed, on over the great torn crest line, to be delivered, at last, into these unholy mountains Webb grew to manhood in, and had not left since, into whose depths he had ventured after silver and gold, up upon whose heights he had struggled always for breath. By that time, both his parents were gone, and he was left with not much more than his Uncle Fletcher's old 12-cylinder Confederate Colt, whose brass work he took care to keep shined, for whose sake he'd put up with remarks like, "Things bigger than you are, Webby," though he kept practicing whenever he could, and the day did finally come when he found he was hitting more than half of any given row of bean cans with it. In Leadville, the year the gaslight went in, he saw Miva Dash dancing up on top of the bar of Pap Wyman's saloon in high boots and jet beads, while freight men, roustabouts, and grease-bearded 10-dayers hollered for every kick and twirl, even to taking their cigars out of their mouths before they did. Yes, children, strange to tell, Your ma was a saloon girl when we first met. You're giving 'em the wrong idea, she pretended to object. I always worked for myself. You were paying off that bartender. We all were. Way he saw it, that meant working for him. He tell you that? Not Adolf, but the other one, Ernst, with the real weedy mustache, talked sort of foreign. That's him. Just lonely. Thought we's all gonna be his concubines, which was a common arrangement, according to him, wherever that was he was from. The town, only recently founded, was already being turned black with slag. Up every alley, all the way out into open country, you saw it towering in great poison mountains. Not a place where you'd expect romance to blossom, but next either of them knew, they were hitched and living up East Fifth in Finntown among the waste piles. One night, just off shift, Webb heard a tremendous uproar in the narrow alley known as St. Louis Avenue, and there was Vaco Rudavara carefully holding a vodka jug in one hand while battling a number of camp guards with the other. For a weedy little customer, Webb could be formidable in these affairs. Though by the time he got into it, most of the hard work was done. Vaco bleeding but solid on his feet, and the hirelings either flat on the pavement or limping away. When Webb brought him back to the house, Mava might have raised an eyebrow. Nice to see this married life ain't slowing you down, honey. She kept her job at Pap Wyman's till she was sure Reef was on the way. The kids were all silver boom babies, up and running just in time for repeal. Been dealt a full house here, Webb liked to say. Jacks and queens, less you count your ma as the ace o' spades. Death card, she'd mutter. Thanks a lot. But dearest, Webb in all innocence, I meant it as a compliment. They had maybe a year or two where it wasn't too desperate. Webb took them all to Denver and bought Mava a fancy briar pipe to replace the beat-up old corn cob she usually smoked. They ate ice cream at a soda fountain. They went to Colorado Springs and stayed at the Antlers Hotel and took the Cog Railway up Pikes Peak. Though maybe for a couple of years, off and on with the railroad, Webb might have seen some ray of daylight. He always ended up back down some hole in some mountain, mucking, timbering, whatever he could get. Leadville, thinking itself God's own beneficiary when the old lode was rediscovered in '92, got pretty much done in by repeal, and Creed, the same time, sucker punched right after the big week-long wing-ding on the occasion of Bob Ford's funeral. The railroad towns, Durango, Grand Junction, Montrose, and them were pretty stodgy by comparison, but Webb mostly remembered being the sunlight. Telluride was in the nature of an outing to depraved amusement resort, whose electric lighting at night in its extreme and unmerciful whiteness produced a dream-silvered rogues district of nonstop poker games, erotic practices in backlot shanties, Chinese opium dens most of the Chinese in town had the sense to stay away from, mad foreigners screaming in tongues apt to come skiing down the slopes in the dark with demolition in mind. After 1893, after the whole nation, one way or another, had been put through a tiresome moral exercise over repeal of the Silver Act, ending with the gold standard reclaiming its ancient tyranny, it was slow times for a while, and Webb and the family moved around a lot, down to the Huerfano County for a while to dig coal. While Ed Farr was still sheriff, before he got shot by train robbers over near Cimarron and Webb would come home black-faced and unrecognizable enough that the kids either fell down laughing or ran away screaming. Later in Montrose, they all lived in some part tent, part shed on the lot out back of a boarding house that was hardly more than a shack itself. Lake helping with chores, Reef and Frank bringing potato sacks from the wagon, sometimes pulling third shift scullery duty, or as the gold camps began to pick up some of the slack, back down into one or another of those mountainside workings. Reef, before he got out of the house for good, working a spell same shift as his father, picking up the loose ore and loading it onto the cars and pushing them to the hoist over and over. He got to hate it pretty quick, and Webb, seeing his point, never held it against him. When Webb and the boys were on different shifts, Mava had nothing but round-the-clock work, cooking Cornish pasties by the dozens for them to take down in the hole. She'd learned from the Cornish wives in Jacktown to put apple slices in along with the meat and potatoes. Then something else hot to feed each of them again when they came back up, hungrier than bears. By the time Webb had worked his way from hoistman through the single jacker to assistant foreman, he was intimate with the deepest arcana of dynamite, or acted like he was. Even on his own time, he loved to play with that miserable stuff. It drove Mava just damn crazy. But nothing she ever said had any effect. He was always out in some high meadow or back of some waste dump, crouched behind a rock with that fox's gleam in his eye, trembling, waiting for one of his old explosions. When he thought they were the right age, he brought the children into it one by one, each taking to it different. No way to tell just from watching, of course, who might grow up into a decent bomber. Fact, Webb wasn't sure he had wanted to let any of them all the way in. Reef didn't say much, but his eyes got a squint into them that when you saw it, you learned to take care. Frank was more cautious, in a kid engineer kind of way, trying to blow up every form of terrain he could talk Webb around to, just to see if there was a general rule to any of it. When it came little Kit's turn, he already had it in his mind from a carnival show down at Olath, where he'd seen a dynamited carny jump up out of the blast good as new, that you could blow up anybody over and over, and the worst they'd ever get would be comically inconvenienced. So after one lesson, he was set to run out and dynamite school teachers, shift bosses, storekeepers, anybody happened to offend him on a particular day, and it took extra vigilance all around to keep him out of Webb's string of personal blasting sheds. Lake, bless her heart, did not make faces, or plug her ears, or sigh in boredom, or anything else the boys had assumed she'd do. She picked up the process right away, first time touching off a fine high-radius concussion, creating several tons of trap rock. Maybe smiling some to herself, the way she had begun to do. The question of where his loyalties should, as against did, lie had been gnawing at Webb a good part of his life since Shorty's billiard saloon and Cripple, one he was never able to get sorted out, really. If there had been the simple luxury of time, maybe to do nothing but put his feet up on some wood porch rail, roll a cigarette, gaze at the hills, let the breezes slide over him. Sure, but as it was, he never saw a minute that didn't belong to somebody else. Any discussion of deeper topics, such as what to keep hammering at, what to let go, how much he owed who, had to be done on the run with people he had hoped were not going to fink him out. Not so sure sometimes. I wouldn't be better off without all these family obligations, he admitted once to Reverend Moss. who, though lacking at the authority to remit the sins of his flock of dynamiters, made up for that with a bottomless appetite for listening to complaints. Just to be working solo, Webb muttered, some room to move. Maybe not. And the Rev set out his theory and practice of resistance to power. You live any kind of covert life at all, and they are all going to come after you. They hate loners. They can smell it. Best disguise is no disguise. You must belong to this everyday world. Be in it. Be of it. A man like you, with a wife, children, last ones they tend to suspect. Too much to lose. No one could be that hard of a hard case, they think. No one is willing to risk losing that. Well, they'd be right. I'm not. He shrugged. Then better not be more of what you seem. But I can't just... Then the Rev, who hardly ever so much as smiled, was close to it now. No, you can't, he nodded. And God bless you for it, class brother. Mind telling me what I'm supposed to sleep? When I'm supposed to sleep? Sleep is when you sleep. That all you worried about? Only that I wouldn't want it out where anybody can get to me. I'd sure need a safe bedroll someplace. Someplace secret. But there's... At word again. You can't be having too many of them secrets, can you, if you're trying to look normal? And yet, the normal world of Colorado, how safe was that to be relying on, with death around every corner, when all could be gone in an uncaught breath, quick as an avalanche? Not as if the Rev wanted heaven. He'd have been content with some place the men didn't have to be set on each other, like dogs in a dogfight for lung-destroying jobs that paid at best $3.50 a day. $3 blessed 50 cents a day. There had to be a living wage and some right to organize, because alone a man was a mule dropping on the edge of life's mountain trail, ready to either be squashed flat or kicked into the void. Quite beautiful out here. Well, it's a fun book to envision. Some guy running with his dog. Well, that's it for today. This is a big one. I think if I were to pick this book to read out loud, it would be long videos. I might do one of these one day. But for now, I think I'm going to pick a shorter book to read out loud. And that will be the first time I do that. But it is very nice out here. That's for sure. What's the purpose of this? Oh. Alrighty. Well, that's all for today. Pick the book to read out loud. We'll do a full reading of something. And then we'll get into a topic of discussion next week, which ties into the being trapped in between a rock and a hard place tied to the idea of conundrum. I'm going to be talking about a conundrum that generally people seem to be in right now as we speak, myself included. Lots of people. We'll get to that. And I'm going to enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. I want to give you a quick view of the canopy. Looks very cool. And with that, we are out of here. Peace out, people.